Hey, so we all know muscle cars are all about raw speed, power, and performance, and the excitement of driving the car. People have asked me why I went old school instead of picking up a new Dodge Charger or Challenger like everybody else is doing right now. That's just not my style. Today we're looking at 5 ways to make your old toy a rocket with the aid of an engine analyzer or a desktop dyno software. So we're going to start with exhaust. Exhaust is usually the first thing most guys do. A lot of these older cars come factory with like a 2¼ inch exhaust, which means it's a huge restriction. You see on my screen, it's like a 250 CFM exhaust system, right? And that's just not going to do. So the first thing most guys do is change out exhaust. A lot of older cars come factory with small 2½ inch exhaust or 2¼ inch exhaust, which is even worse, obviously. This is a massive restriction. Smog era cars are notorious for this. So if you look at this Pontiac Trans Am we have here, it probably came with something like 2¼ inch exhaust or 2½ inch exhaust, which either way it's 250 or 300 CFM. That's not enough. So we're going to run this on the desktop dyno and see what we end up with. So you see here we have a peak of 352 torque and a peak of 254 horsepower. So we're going to run the chart. Really lackluster lines. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the exhaust out with just stock everything else. So we're going to go with a dual system, because most guys, let's be honest, are going to run 2-inch duals, 2½ inch duals. When it comes to a 350 to 400 cubic inch engine with like 350 horsepower or so, I usually recommend a 3-inch single or a 2½ inch duals. If you have like 400 horsepower, in something like that, 3-inch duals are probably the way to go. In like a 400 cube setup like we've got here. If you've got 454s, 455s, 461s, things like that, 3½ inch duals are probably what you more than likely want. 4-inch duals, to me, are just way too big to run unless you're a track-only car. But let's get this figured out. So we're going to run just a basic street exhaust system, typical aftermarket stuff, nothing special. We're going to go 2½ inch full duals, because this is a super low horsepower engine, being a smog engine right now. Keeping the exhaust manifold the same. I'm just going to hit OK. Going to calculate, let it do its thing. Pretty good gains. Let's hit this chart and see what we end up with. So you see the entire range picks up. And that's really what you want. So if you're looking here at 4,500 RPM, that's a really substantial gain for something that's fairly cheap to do and fairly easy to do. But if you want more out of this engine, you're going to want a cam. A cam is really the thing that tells the engine what is actually doing. But it's safe to assume if you've got a setup like this, whether it's Mopar, Ford, whatever, the cam is probably a little too small. I know Pontiacs, so I know I've got 3 options. I've got an OEM cam, like an 068 Pontiac cam. You can go to aftermarket thing, like a 2802 Summit, or I can just call it good at 165 ratio rocker arms. You would think that changing your rocker arms out actually is the cheaper option of the 3, but in actuality, basic flat tappet cams are really fairly cheap. Like the Summit one can be had for $75. So let's throw on actually a 2801, which is probably more of a safer cam for this. So you've got 214 duration at 0.05, 224, 1.5 ratio rocker arms. Really conservative lift numbers here. I would say you could push this to 0.49 pretty safely against 6X heads. So let's hit OK. Go to run this, and you see a little more gains. We lost some down here. That's most likely due to port velocity and just kind of changing the curves. But that's not uncommon to lose and gain with cams. But the thing with a cam is it only helps if you're willing to do the other supporting mods, like porting. Porting is what you absolutely have to do if you want to push that cam. If I was going to cam a car, I wouldn't put it in a car without changing the exhaust manifolds out first. So I'm going to show you what that actually does to get the full exhaust actually worked on after we have this cammed in. So we're going to go boom. I'm going to go street headers, 1 5/8. Just keep them small just for the sake of cheapness. And we're going to go like a Super 10 kind of muffler. Okay, so now let's see what we end up with. See, that is the thing, is an engine is an air pump, obviously. So air in, air out. Even with that smaller, more restrictive exhaust, you're obviously giving up power with the cam. And we are going to pick up essentially what we lost. Yeah, everywhere you look at it, we're up. So that's obviously what you want to do. We're going to need more air in now that we can get more air out. So let's port the heads. So the factory heads are something like 203 CFM at 0.5 lift. We're not quite to the 0.5 lift, but if you look here, there's not much disparity between 4 and 5. So the difference here actually doesn't make it worth pushing to the 0.5. It makes it more worth hitting the lower over here so you don't stress the springs, the engine, and all that good stuff. So we're going to port this out. We're gonna call it a basic port job because we're going to assume you don't know what you're really doing to get the right numbers. But if you're going to port ahead, more than likely you can get anywhere from 5 horsepower up to 90 horsepower. But what we're going to do is we're going to put this up to about 225 CFM because I would call it actually safe for what we can look at. So go to our head. We're going to go 0.5. We're just going to assume that we're going to get 225, 0.4. We're going to assume that you move that up to like 210-ish. Yeah, call it 210. All right. So you see the efficiency gain there. We're going to hit OK. We're going to calculate. And you see more gains. They're mostly up high. And then you have other options like compression changes, things like that with different heads if you go that route. So with the engine setup essentially how we want it, we're actually going to run this now on a desktop quarter-mile setup. So we're going to take what we have here with the factory iron intake, the quadrajet, headers, and a cam. Basic stock heads that are ported just ever so slightly. We could push that a little further, but for this sake, we're not going to. So I'm going to calculate performance. I'm going to send this to this. So I'm going to run this on a quarter. So we're looking at, call it 15 seconds. Okay, that's probably about right. About 15 seconds flat. So we are going to throw our new 346 horsepower, 420 foot-pounds of torque engine on. Hit OK. So we cut it down a full second by doing those mods. You're not that expensive into it. You're probably at this point, we'll call it $1,000. Just if you bought exhaust that was already pre-done. More than likely you're $300-ish in. So we're going to go back. The big thing we're talking about now is gearing. If you have all this power, you see, you're running 13.85. That's respectable, but we know we can get more out of this. This is with a 241 gear ratio that came on things like the Esprits, Berlinettas, just your basic models and smog era cars. So what we're going to do is we're going to swap this out to a 373, which is a pretty common street gear setup. So I'm going to calculate it again, and you see we cut quite a bit of time off, 13.29 from 13.85. And look at your 60-foot times are way different, and your mile an hour really hasn't changed that much, but you're able to really wrap it out. But the problem here, you see, you are just spinning like crazy this entire time. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about mini spool. So mini spools are something you really should be doing if you're taking your gears out. The gears are probably going to cost you like $300 if you do it yourself and you're a little bit handy. But a mini spool should be like $60 to $200. They're really not that expensive, and just look what it does for you. So we're gonna hit OK on that, and you cut even more time because both of your tires are spinning at the same rate now. You're essentially doing what we have for welded gears. I see guys do welded gears, and it makes me freaking cringe. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. If something goes wrong, that rear end is pretty much useless. So I don't know why guys would want to do that to waste parts, unless they're looking at changing to a Mosier or something like that. But even at that just seems crazy to me. So essentially, guys, those are your 5 things that you're looking at doing to make your old car just really more competitive. So we're looking at exhaust, a cam, porting the intake and heads, changing your gear ratio out. Just go something to like 373 or 410. 410 is more of a weekend Saturday car. And throw a spool in, or a mini spool in the rear end. You guys will know what the big difference is in this. What do you guys do for just the cheap horsepower? I'm very curious to know what budget-minded guys are doing out there. Comment down below, let me know. If you guys like this video, please subscribe, like the video. As always, have a good one, and I will see you on the road.